Today, we have an interesting personality who's at the intersection of agriculture, manufacturing, and innovation, Miss Arushi Jain from Gulshan Polyols, where she serves as the Joint Managing Director. That's not just it, she's also the Joint Secretary at GEMA, the Grain Ethanol Manufacturers Association, where she's got a ringside view of the promising industry that grain based ethanols are making in transition to biofuels. I am Sriraman, this is ChiniMandi Podcast. Welcome, ma'am. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Sriraman. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. So let's begin. If we look at the diversion of grains towards ethanol, it's been a trend, right? We can't depend on just one crop such as sugar. So how are we in terms of having adequate supply of grains when it comes to meeting our ethanol targets?
So India is a grain surplus country, and thanks to the ethanol blending program, that we realized this. So when just about a year ago, when this program started, and so many plants had been set up with large capacities of 500 KL, 800 KL, and we all were wondering where will grain come from, and we thought that we were very dependent on some surplus grain from FCI. But good decisions by the government, and for whatever reason that they withdrew the surplus grain from the ethanol program temporarily. We did produce 20%, enough ethanol to blend 20% without any support from the surplus FCI rice.
Okay.
So that's a great news. And we had no confidence in us that we could do this without any support. And we had no confidence in our farmers, we had no confidence in our agriculture. And as a farming produce, as an agricultural produce, and as industrial capacity, we can go way beyond 20%. But now we have some limitations with the MVs taking the ability, the adaptability to the blended fuel, and that will happen with time.
So in terms of, let's say, the supply chain issues, right? How do we see it happening from where its grains are cultivated? Let's say Karnataka is a leader in maize production, but some of your plants are in Assam and MP. So are the other plants. So how do you see these dots connecting?
So grain ethanol plants are located pan-India. So they're not concentrated in sugarcane belts or only in grain supply belts. So that is the good advantage of the grain, because it is transportable.
Right.
So it is
unlike a sugar can.
Yes, which has a very limited shelf life. So each time a truck loaded with cane is waiting outside a mill, it's losing its
in fact,
moisture.
The mills are in between the sugar farms pretty much.
Yeah, because that's how their model is to be, because the moisture needs to be
retained, and more you transport, the cost efficiencies don't work out. But you're saying that doesn't happen with a maize or any other
no grain. So no grain. And fortunately for ethanol, we can actually go on multi-grain. So any grain that is available. The plants have now become equipped to process any grain, so wherever we can get starch, and that is primarily right now broken rice and maize, and we can process it and make ethanol out of it.
Do you see any challenges in the supply chain or in feedstock in terms of wanting the right feedstock or it coming on time?
This was a question I would have been very nervous answering 6 months ago.
Okay.
And very fortunately, we are beyond those 6 months. And I'm proud to say that we are a grain surplus country, and I do not see this as a challenge anymore. Yes, any harvest of any crop is cyclical. So there is a little easier supply and a little restricted supply because the storage comes in place and so on. But no, the availability is there, very much there, and it's all around the year. So
that brings me to an interesting point. See, India went from net exporter of maize to now importer of maize. So while it's been a blessing for the ethanol industry, somewhere the affected ones are, let's say, a textile or poultry at best. So how do you see this balance between food security and fuel security?
So many questions. From exporter to an importer, I thought was a very nice punchline. But what we should be asking is, are we really short of grain? The fact is that just in May 2024, we were blending 12% ethanol, and we had so much grain and so much ethanol supply that within 7-8 months we were at 20% blending
That's right.
targets.
Yes.
So that by itself indicates that there was no shortage. It was a very short run shortage. So even my company imported maize, very small quantities, because it seemed like there was a shortage. It's our plants have run more than on higher capacities than ever before. My starch plant, my sorbitol plant, or ethanol plants have run on higher capacities because there seems to be have been a demand for it. So that was one of the questions, and I think you had asked me
the balance between food security and fuel security. For example, the ethanol industry is truly blessed now, but let's say the poultry owners who are pretty much depending on maize as a primary feed for their chicken, they are facing the shortage, or they have to pay higher prices, though that affects their margin. How do you balance this? I'm not blaming the grain ethanol manufacturers.
No, there's nothing. Yes, nothing to
How do we
blame.
balance it?
Yeah. So the poultry industry was using more maize earlier, but they also have the ability to shift between the grains. They can also use broken rice, and they can also take to cattle feed now, which is produced. DDGS is being produced out of the ethanol plants.
But DDGS is high in protein, very low in carbs, right? So that can't
That
quickly
balance.
replace the chicken feed.
Yeah, okay, but they're still feeding them grain. There was a temporary shortage. I cannot deny that. And the starch industry more so depends 100% on maize.
That's right.
So they do not have any feedstock diversity. So I think they were the ones who went through a very tough time, and they also had to import. So did poultry, but it was again a short-term loss for a long-term gain. Because in this time, the ethanol industry came really forward. They took very active steps for promoting maize cultivation, and they indulged in educating and promoting agricultural practices to promote the productivity and so on.
Right. And you have been a great proponent of encouraging farmers to cultivate more maize with Makka Ugao, right? So what is the genesis of it? How effective has it been? If you could share some nuances from the campaign that you have been doing actively.
Yeah, very interesting campaign, Makka Ugao, Khushali Pao. Yeah, so how this goes is that we all were nervous. We all thought that we needed some maize to grow overnight. Okay, so we all were fearing feedstock shortage, just as you rightly asked. It was only a fear. However, the good thing that happened is that the industrialists went from their factories to the fields, okay, including myself. I also acquired some knowledge about promoting agriculture and cultivation practices. And we went and shared with the farmers how to cultivate maize. And
so these were the farmers who are not currently cultivating maize?
Yes, they were not cultivating maize, so we had to introduce them as a crop, as well as farmers who are producing. So we just don't want a shift. We also want intercropping to happen. And see, the whole program is to raise farmer income. So the shift will not necessarily help in achieving that target. So adding will. So the intercropping,
whatever they are doing plus
they need to do a plus.
Right.
Yeah, so that would help. And we went forward and partnered with IIMR, who's done a fantastic job on ground. And many seed companies have worked very actively, also distributed free seeds, and the agronomists have set up workshops in small tents. And, it's been quite an interesting journey. And you see, more importantly for a farmer, when they see an ethanol producer and they see a buyer for themselves, so they are assured of a market, and that's all that they're really looking for,
right?
Because they know that they're producing vegetables which are not getting sold in time, and their producers are rotting. So they want, and maize is a very hardy crop,
right?
And it has a shelf life, so there is no immediate rush.
So the risks are minimized for them.
Risks are minimized for them, and then they have a buyer. So that's what they're really looking for. It's been going very successful, and we are very proud of this whole effort. We are doing pan-India, and lots of GEMA members have come forward. And
so any success story or a farmer story you want to share, like that you found surprising or insightful or shocking? Could be any theme.
Yeah, my interaction with many farmers was very interesting actually, and they all are looking just for a market, for their a stable market for their basic produce.
Okay.
So that's really all that they're looking for, and it just the workshops are very interesting
Any
because
particular state you focused on?
we worked all around in Assam,
Okay.
Madhya Pradesh,
Okay.
Uttar Pradesh. As a company, Gulshan Polyols, we focused on all three states, and
Okay.
we had good feedback from everywhere. And Assam seems to be a very promising area for maize cultivation because their seed is very large and the starch content is very high. The DDGS is of great quality. So Northeast maize will be upcoming and a premium maize.
So can it become like a maize belt, like we have sugar belt? Can the Seven Sisters or those areas, eastern, be a maize belt for us?
Yes, can be, and Bihar already is.
Okay.
Bihar is doing very well. It's a leading producer of maize as a state. So yes, the northeastern part can also catch up and continue to do whatever they are doing and add on maize.
I thought Karnataka was the leader. No, was it not?
Changing. Now Madhya Pradesh has become the leader,
Oh, wow. Okay.
leading producer of maize. However, the corn quality is not so good, and the yield that is for the farmer is not so high either.
Right.
So, but that's okay. That's all right. And it's a kharif crop that they do. So the farmers mainly rely on the rains
Yeah.
for their cultivation.
So talking of cultivation and kharif, how do you balance year-round supply?
Maize grows all around the year. You know, it has a kharif, rabi, spring, winter,
Okay, so multiple
post-rainy.
harvests. Yeah.
You know, so many seasons are there, and it's a 90-day crop. So some state or the other, and even some states can take multiple cycles of
Right.
this crop. So it's not just one cycle. You can take 2 to 3. I think other countries take much more, but you can take on a crop rotation.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Gulshan has been a leading player in starch derived products, right? And now biofuels are your second major source of revenue. So how did this transition happen? What are the strategic advantages that you saw while doing so, and how's been the journey?
Very interesting. Gulshan is into starch derivatives and native starch. We have been conventionally used to processing grain, maize and rice. And ethanol is also a part of the same thing,
Right.
same portfolio, because essentially it is a starch derivative. All alcohols are.
Yeah.
So they all start with a grain. They take starch and they convert into whatever chemicals they have to do forward. So it was in the same line of portfolio that we added another one. However, Gulshan is the only starch company doing ethanol so
Yeah,
far.
yeah.
So far, and the journey has been very, very good and very enriching. And now ethanol is, because of the volumes and the markets that the government promised through EBPP. So now for Gulshan, ethanol is a leading revenue generator on a company as a whole.
So my following question is asked in interest of all the prospective ethanol makers. So let's go back in time. When you are about to make a huge capex, in fact multiple capex, from a pivot or a growth in your business from starch to biofuel, right? What were the assurances that you saw versus what are the things that you're anxious about? I mean, it's a big capex investment.
So it started, we already had a foot in the door actually. So one of our units in Madhya Pradesh was already producing alcohol. But the market was very small. For alcohol, it is a small market industry actually, because there is only so much consumption and it was potable alcohol. We all had spare capacities. So came in the biofuel program, and quickly we were quick to install the MSDH columns and the required equipments. We were able to acquire required permissions, and that took a little bit of a pursuance.
This was 5 years ago?
5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So it took a little bit of pursuance, in fact more, about 6 years ago,
Okay.
to convince the government that this was a fuel grade ethanol, alcohol, and it was different. It did not really require involvement of excise and the state authorities. Very fortunately, we have received very good support through and through. So
From the policymakers?
from the
government?
policymakers, from Madhya Pradesh, state excise, everybody supported the company and supported the program.
So when you were in this process, you already had off-takers talking to you, or you went ahead and then you spoke to all the off-takers, OMCs, oil companies and things?
No, the government had already rolled out the program.
Right.
So if the government has rolled out the program, that means the market is open and we just had to supply. So we didn't have to make dialogue to anybody. We just had to set up the plants and register our production capacities to the OMCs. And that's it. And we just had to supply. So because of being the promising volumes that EBPP had, so we made larger capacity installations. So we could supply in time, actually.
Interesting. So how do you see further demand coming in with the blending becoming we have achieved our target, right? And maybe if we take a leaf from Brazil, we might increase the blending. So how do you see further expansion into it?
Actually, wherever we've got so far, we're taking it for granted. It's really nice that we have come so far with, our reservations for the surplus grain, our industrial capacities, and our MVs, motor vehicles capacities to absorb the blended fuel. We've already done very, very well, but of course we want more.
For example, even if it comes at change of your core identity, let's say you are known for starch and even calcium carbonate and all those things, but imagine in next 5 years your number one source of revenue is biofuels.
Already is.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the second highest right now.
I think by this year end, when you have the results, things will be changing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So Polyols is now a biofuels company in that sense. I mean, with
Gulshan Polyols, yes. One of our leading producers, yes. But we are again a starch
okay
derivatives company.
Yeah.
No, we are still essentially a starch derivatives company. Okay. Yes. We are still in the grain business. So, and we keep evolving. And we got lucky with getting the volumes.
Right.
Because it's not easy to reach these volumes.
Yeah. So, what do you think about 2G ethanol, which requires further steps, further capex, but the input feedstocks become much broader, right? Anything that is cellulose stick you can start using, not just the maize, but even the other parts of the maize could be used. So, what's your opinion about 2G ethanol?
The viability of 2G ethanol is highly questionable as of now.
Okay.
Because what we are trying to do is recover starch from the cellulose, because essentially the starch, some form of sugar, the starch and the sugar is similar thing, has to be converted into the ethanol. So whatever is there in a stock, has to be converted. So how much is going to be there in the stock? And then it has to be dried and processed. Because so the viability of 2G ethanol is greatly questionable. There are companies who are doing it.
Okay.
And we are waiting and watching.
All right. Wait and watch is your answer for that.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about you and your leadership and some of the opportunities that you have been at. So tell us, there are very few women in agro commodity and the intersection of biofuel. How did you come to be in this unique position?
It's unique, not so unique for me. I'm second generation in this business. Okay. So it was an easy opportunity for me. So I just stepped up and took what was already on the platter. So I just went ahead and expressed my interest and commitment. And that's really what I brought to this company and to this whole industry.
So what were some of the initial challenges, learning curve in that sense?
Learning curves, adapting every day is a learning curve, but if you are interested and if you're committed, it doesn't feel like a challenge.
Okay.
It's a challenge that's thrilling.
Right.
So I get bored very fast. So, so you need something new to keep you excited and going.
Right.
So, no, it just felt very natural, just kept flowing.
So when you took up the role or you decided to, take the leap, so was it as per your expectation or little more, little less? Was it overwhelming, underwhelming for initial days?
Just flew, very smooth. Just sailed through. I think there were no challenges, no expectations attached to me. So Dr. Jain, my father, never really put me up under any pressure. So in fact, I feel that everybody, whoever may have expected around me, so they kind of kept getting surprised with whatever I kept doing and the interest and commitment I kept expressing. So, which may have been surprising for them, and their surprise was an encouragement to me that I am doing well. But it was not really it was not really something that I was like, okay.
Right.
It
So you
is-
come from a marketing background.
Yes.
But is there any function of Gulshan that you really enjoy doing?
I enjoy every aspect. I look at marketing and I look at production. I really want, my key focus is on revenue generation. So because ethanol is about production, and of course sales is very important. So sales of our starch derivatives is very sensitive and very critical. And so whatever drives revenue to the company, I think I try to focus on that.
Right.
Yeah, so and that's how it is.
Okay, another question. So what unique perspectives do women essentially bring in the agro business?
So agri and industrial industries are very set. They're brick and mortar businesses, and they're set mind frames.
Right.
So what women, I think, contribute is a sense of progressiveness,
Okay.
modernization, and stability and innovation a little bit, because people are not used to seeing women in agri and
That's
industrial businesses.
So in agri, we see them in the field, in the
Yeah.
farm, right? On the farm or
On the
on the
farm,
field.
yeah.
There's a good gender mix there.
Yes.
But when it comes to the boardroom, that affects this men and women on the field, there is not many women. So you are in a unique position that way.
Yes, that
And
way.
have you seen something that you did that made life better for everyone?
I did many things that
Okay.
made life better for many people. Yes. So
No, from a woman's point of view, I'm saying you saw a particular aspect of, women in agro, especially in the production side or the field side, and now that you have the power vested in you to make some difference, even maybe part of the Makka campaign or anything.
see, industry is gender neutral.
Okay.
It's everybody is looking for anybody with a commitment and sincerity. So it does not look at which gender you're coming from. Okay, if you generally ask about women, yes, they do bring a sense of progressiveness in a very old-fashioned industry, because it indicates a sanity of working environment. There is a truth to that. So, like, I don't know how to talk about myself, but in Gulshan, we have plugged some women in small leadership roles. So, and when they talk downstream, when
Right.
they talk to traders, when
Right.
they talk to suppliers, and buyers, and some administration. So, when they ask them to put some Excels together, conventionally, even now people don't want to put things in Excel. So, but women will ask, they will do it.
Right.
So there is acceptance, there is modernization. So that is a very good thing. And so that's a modernization is what I think women bring overall, and that's for women. But for myself, as I said, industry is gender neutral. I have to keep innovating like any entrepreneur. You have to be on the edge, and you have to bring your energy, you have to bring your commitment, you have to be foresighted, you have to turn around everything that you're doing every now and then. Because many things, the deeper I look, the more I know that there was so much scope that we kept missing out. Oh, we never saw this. So, you have to innovate. Whatever you're doing, the brick and mortar has to be innovated. So that's how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say you had a red carpet inside the family business, right?
Yes.
But what advice would you give to, let's say, a 20-something-year-old girl who's yet to make a decision about her career choice, but wants to get into agro or grain-based, starch-based businesses? What would be your advice?
I would encourage everyone. Again, I repeat that,
Okay.
you see, industry is gender neutral. So many men also don't want to get into the conventional businesses,
Right.
because they don't like the work environment. Why women alone? So, but I encourage everybody to get into conventional businesses, because they are stable careers, first of all. So if you're serious about your career, you need to make some stable choices.
Right.
So, and agri and industrial would definitely be one of the stable businesses.
Primary
Primary businesses,
You can't-
yes.
You can
Yes.
be without a computer. I mean, there's nobody who can be without food or any of the agro commodities that we are talking
Yes,
about.
now computer is also essential.
No,
I
I'm
don't.
saying it's okay. Life will go on with or without computer, but
Yeah.
without rice, I don't think so.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, but one must commit, and anybody who's serious about themselves, about the business, you have to be to take these choices.
Right. So you mentioned about the need for innovation. So tell us some of the innovations you have pioneered or you saw through at Gulshan or in the industry that came under your supervision.
So Gulshan gives me a lot of opportunity to be creative. So something that is, I think, still innovative, but not really, but okay, it is. Looking through databases.
Okay.
Okay. So I love diving into databases. Okay. So it be sales, marketing, it be a purchase, it be production, and so much database is already built in to our systems, and how much we can explore and gauge of our working from those databases is not a joke, you know. So a lot of things are available through our ERPs, through our purchase orders, through
Right.
our sales
Making
orders,
informed decisions. Yeah.
making informed decisions, and even the performance of the plant. You see, a lot of instrumentation is already embedded in our plants. Okay, I am not sure how many of us, at least we are not making adequate use of that database. Okay, we are reading those figures, digits on a running basis, and
Right.
we are operating plant point to point. But are we pulling out that data history and tabulating and seeing exactly what are those numbers saying? Are we making the correct correlations of those numbers? So, since ethanol is a more process driven industry, so one needs to fine tune these processes and deep dive into all the operation history which is embedded through database in
Right.
our systems, in our DCSs. So, I think that is innovative.
Of course, that's the genesis of fourth industrial revolution, combining process, people, sensor data, all of it together. Yeah. So happy to hear Gulshan is at the forefront of it.
I don't know forefront, but we are keeping up with pace. Yeah, we are keeping up with times. Yeah, there are other sources apart from our own sources. There are other sources of information and database for marketing, for studying global trends. So we try to keep up with them. We try to keep a tab on them to study the global trends. So that's
So
something
talking of
innovative.
trends, see, along with your leadership role at Gulshan, you also have a ringside view as the joint secretary of GEMA, right? The Grain
Yes.
Ethanol Manufacturers Association.
Yes.
So how does the industry look like from the ringside view that you got?
It's a great platform actually.
There are about 70 members in GEMA.
130 now,
Oh wow!
and it's
double
still
as what I said. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
and still growing stronger actually.
Okay.
So yeah, there was a need to actually unite all the voices because we are in ethanol. We are in a situation with single buyer and multiple suppliers.
Right.
So and also coming from various mindset, and everybody's problem is genuine. Because everybody is invested to produce ethanol and supply to the single buyer. Okay, and at the end of the day, we have to. There's only one purpose to make the country, strong on agroeconomy and raise farmers' income. We have to have the food security. We have to have the fuel security, and we are all a part of that whole cycle.
Right.
So everybody's problem is genuine, but some matured platform is required to unify all the voices without having, internal clashes of interest.
Right.
So we have to rely that the government has designed a very good system, and we all have to find our space in it. So GEMA is a good platform to present everybody's perspective and issues which are very genuine. So
what would be the number one priority area that GEMA is working on right now?
So till last month, we were very focused on the FCI supply to be resumed. While I clearly said that we are a grain surplus country, very fortunately, but having this surplus of FCI available in the market, it creates grain liquidity.
Okay.
Yeah, so otherwise, the government is also, their FCI stocks are much higher than what they are supposed to be. So they are obligated to buy, and so their warehouses are full and flooded, overflowing with stocks of rice, old rice, which is unfit for human consumption. And in the market, there is tightness of grain availability because it seems that ethanol is suddenly consuming all of it. So, with the surplus FCI rice, which is unfit for human consumption, when it becomes available in the market, then there is grain liquidity and there is ease out on pricing pressure, basically. There is ease out because the traders and the free market realizes that the buyer has an option of buying from the government. So we wanted to create that option, and the government supported it, and that was done. We are currently requesting the government to maintain this flow as long as it has surplus stocks. If there is no surplus available,
Right.
no problem. But
Yeah.
if there is surplus available, so we request to make it available for conversion into ethanol.
In terms of working with policymakers, regulators, government in general, when do you wear Gulshan hat? When do you wear GEMA hat? How do you balance these two?
I've been very well mentored by the administration.
Okay.
So I also didn't realize when I was changing hats, Gulshan to GEMA. I also didn't realize, but very fortunately, I've been matured now to realize when to wear GEMA hat and when to wear Gulshan hat. And when I'm with the policymakers, I do have the responsibility to represent everyone's issues
Yes.
fairly, and I cannot use Gulshan as a scapegoat whenever we are trying to do something ahead. So no, I must explain for everybody on GEMA, so as GEMA members, for 130 people. Yes, administration does sometimes put up those questions that no, you have to answer for all. You cannot answer for Gulshan alone. Intimidating initially.
Yeah.
But I got used to it. Yes, but now I have the maturity. Yes, and now I know that when am I representing GEMA and when am I representing Gulshan very clearly.
All right.
Yes.
So, any startup you admire in the agro commodity sector?
Yes, warehousing businesses, and there are many drone related businesses that are using drone as for mapping of the area, for watching the agriculture produce, to maintain the health of the crop. So admire that.
Right. If not at Gulshan Polyols, where else would you be as a career?
I'd be at Gulshan only. I'd probably be baking bread. I'm a baking technologist.
Right.
I always thought I'll have a baking company. So
You're close. You're dealing with yeast and fermentation.
yeah, I'm very close. Actually, that helped. So I did baking technology from American Institute of Baking. So that's an industrial program actually. So which is what was a very easy foot for me. That was a setting for me to get into this industry because I understand fermentation, I understand processing, the ingredient technology, the starch construction, which is different from wheat, maize, rice. So as a part of my program and curriculum, I did do that, and it did help me, and I had no clue that where I'm going to connect the dots.
Right.
Yes.
So, a country you admire for its green initiatives?
Europe has to be one of the leading countries who acknowledge the responsibility towards environment. So recently I had gone to France for one of the ethanol summits organized by one of the companies for GEMA delegates. And I was too impressed to realize that, they had not made any gardens because they have a rule to keep some land untouched in
Okay.
its natural form. Even
Okay.
if your plant office or something is there, you cannot beautify it to make it a garden also. It's not like a green belt. It has to be the
In
way
its native form.
in
yeah?
its native form. Yes.
That's
So
interesting,
really caught my attention, and I do
I
appreciate
mean, avoid
that.
manipulating nature to some extent.
To
Leave it, let
every
it be.
extent.
Yeah.
Yes. It cannot be a garden either.
So, one policy India needs desperately in agro sector.
So in ethanol program, the voice of agriculture ministry is not very eminent. So this whole program is about farmers. Even we are on field, but the participation of agriculture ministry is almost absent.
Interesting. Okay. So, any role model or mentor you look up to?
You know, a lot of people in the government administration have inspired me, and I do not know very charismatic personalities before, but the more I meet, the more I learn, and my standards become higher. So I do not want to name a person, but many people in government administration, yes, do impress me.
Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. It was absolutely delightful talking to you, Arushi.
It was a pleasure being here with you, Sriraman. Thanks a lot.